Welcome back to the PCC podcast. And today we have a more personal episode that I'm going to be sharing with you today that is going to draw a really important analogy to your weight loss transformation, your body transformation, whatever goal you are striving towards. I hope that this hits home for you today. And before we get into the episode today, I do want to remind you that we are hosting a giveaway. So if you are listening to this podcast right now, that means you have a chance to win $100. How cool is that, right? So how do you win $100? You're going to just leave a rating and review for this podcast. So all you have to do is go to Apple Podcasts. This is where all of the ratings and reviews really stack up. This is easiest typically on your phone. So if you have an iPhone, going to Apple Podcasts, scrolling all the way down on the PCC podcast page, and then hit write a review. When you leave a 5-star rating and write a review, we will be able to see it on our end and then be able to count it towards the entries for a drawing of a $100 gift card of your choice. So this giveaway is going to be extended to October 31st because we did have some glitches in September with being able to see the ratings and reviews that people were submitting. We have now passed that and found a solution. So go ahead and leave that rating and review. We'll make sure to contact you when we see it and when we've counted it. If we don't know how to contact you, we will at least make sure that we keep the tally and post it on the PCC Instagram page when we do draw the winner at the end of October. All right. Thank you guys so much, and let's get into the episode. So for today's episode, I am going to be talking about how learning another language has shifted my perspective around weight loss. If you guys didn't know, I have been learning a new language over the past almost year, which is so crazy. So if you didn't know, I am half Korean, half Caucasian, half Korean. I was born in the States, of course, but my mom immigrated here when she was 13 years old and lived in New York and then Minnesota, and then eventually found her way to having me. And growing up, we didn't speak really any Korean in the household. Maybe a couple of words like hello, goodbye at restaurants, and then let's go, kaja. And that was pretty much the extent of the Korean that I learned outside of maybe a year or two. I can't remember how long that I did this for. I can't imagine that it was more than a year, maybe not even more than 6 months. But when I was maybe under 10 years old, I was enrolled in Korean school as a little girl, and I remember learning the alphabet, Hangul, and that is all of the characters. The alphabet, fun fact, is only 24 characters. It's actually relatively simple compared to the other Asian character languages where each symbol represents like a whole meaning and word and things like that. So it's pretty simple and it functions more like an English alphabet where you just put the letters together and that creates the words. But I didn't really get past that. I maybe knew like 2 or 3 extra words. Other than that, I just knew the alphabet. But I will say in adulthood, having the memory of being able to do that did help set me ahead to skip through what I would call the boring parts of learning Korean and just getting to actually reading and speaking. I also visited Korea with my family when I was 10, and sadly, I was a picky eater and didn't care for the culture at the time. So I only ate bulgogi, which is beef, and rice, and everything else I was super closed off to, and I didn't really appreciate the culture. And sadly, I don't remember much of that trip. I was probably just too young to really have it be salient in my memory today. So the reason why I decided to start studying Korean as of last December 1st exactly, was honestly because of a few things. I haven't been shy about telling you guys that running a business is freaking hard and it is not for the weak. And 2024 was one of the hardest years, if not the hardest year of my adult life of running a business. And it brought some really important lessons to the surface. Those lessons were, number one, life is too short to spend it all working on something that could be gone tomorrow. And that's what I experienced. Not that the business burnt to the ground, but a lot of what I had built, we really had to just kind of start from ground zero, rebuild a lot in 2024 due to turnover and just culture changes and directional changes that I wanted to make. And it felt like what I put 9 years of work into was basically for nothing. And that was the feeling, not the reality, but it brought that lesson to the surface of you need to work on something that is going to last more than something like a business that could, be thriving one day, gone the next, and just have something that's more just for you, right? And so that was one big reason. Another one is it's no secret that our parents get older, and I have really been able to foster a much better relationship with my mom over the past couple of years than I have in my entire life. And you guys know how mothers and daughters are, really just like that. And being able to connect with her on a deeper level was something that I wanted to do. So being able to speak with her in her native tongue, even if she hadn't spoken it since she was in the 8th grade, was something that I wanted to do. And lastly, we do have the desire to travel to Korea with my heritage, as well as the overwhelming obsession in America with Korean culture. It's just become so much more popularized. And I think it's brought my attention more to it, to appreciate it even more and appreciate my roots. So, all that to say, I made the commitment to myself in December of last year that I was going to start studying Korean every single day with a workbook, with calling my mom, with taking lessons. And I have been consistent with that since last December. And I have learned a lot. But most importantly, I think it has been challenging, and it has really actually mirrored some lessons in weight loss, body transformation, health that a lot of people really need to hear. And so this episode is going to be about that. It's not going to be really about me learning Korean, but what you can take from that if you're trying to lose weight, keep it off, and just the lessons that I've learned from my own experience trying something new versus what I've been teaching people and preaching and coaching women on for nearly 10 years now. So the first thing that you need to learn based on learning another language is expectations. So when I started my journey to learning Korean, or let's say starting from where I left off when I was like 6 years old, is that I was probably going to give it at least 1 to 2 full years to be able to just hold my own in a conversation. I am now almost 1 year in, and I can hold a very basic conversation to the level of maybe a 5 or 6-year-old. And that is frustrating because I would love to be fluent tomorrow, but fluency might be a 5-year, 10-year journey, something that I will have to keep working at for a very long time. A lot of people study a language and they never become fluent unless they go live there or immerse themselves. And so when we talk about languages, it's actually pretty common for that to be the standard, right? A couple of years to have that benchmark of being able to hold conversations, have conversational fluency. But with weight loss, our expectations are so staggered in the other direction. We think that we need to be losing 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds in 4 months, 6 months. Or maybe we are quote unquote realistic and we think that it'll take a year to undo a lifetime of bad habits, 50 pounds of weight that came on over the past 10 years, and an overall poor relationship with ourself that we've had since childhood. Now, I don't say that to be mean. I say that to be truthful in the fact that I talk with so many women who are disappointed when the scale doesn't move more than, say, 2 or 5 pounds in a month. When if you really added that up over the course of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and kept it off and continued the pursuit of your health, that would add up very quickly over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And you'd be in a totally different reality. And so the question that I want you to ask yourself when it comes to timeline and expectations is, how might you feel about that smaller progress if you set the timeline for longer out the gate. And if you took whatever you thought the timeline would be for you to lose the weight, keep it off, change your lifestyle, change your habits, change your mindset, and actually stay that way. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is balancing out what we like to call sprints and learning with maintenance periods and practice periods. So when it comes to learning a new language, there is a lot to learn. So there is the grammar, the structure, how to actually put sentences together, but also just the thousands and thousands and thousands of words that until you truly memorize all of the vocabulary, you just can't use it. And so I've quickly learned over the course of this year that I am very all or nothing. And whenever I dive into something, I dive in head first. I try to immerse myself as much as possible. And that has been a pillar of my personality for every pursuit I've ever had. And this has actually been no different. Since last December, I have immersed myself more in Korean culture, dramas, music, and of course, the learning part. With that comes a large influx of new knowledge. And I never like to put limits on anyone, especially not myself. But what I will say is that the human brain has a capacity for how much it can learn and actually absorb before things just fall through the cracks if you're not practicing it. And so what I realized was I did need to take some breaks on how much new information I was consistently consuming and focus on actually practicing and implementing the information that I already had. Because there were periods of time where I would learn a new grammatical structure for how to say certain things every single day for multiple weeks straight. And then it would come time for my lesson, my live one-on-one lesson with a Korean tutor I have that actually lives in Seoul. And she'd be like, "What did you learn?" And every time I'd be like, "I have no idea. I'd have to go get the book and tell you. I can't remember." And then we would go through and speak and practice. And then she'd bring up one of the topics that was in the book. I'd be like, "Oh, I learned that. I just forgot." And then I wouldn't remember any of the rules for how to use it or anything like that. So that is another piece of making sure that you are pacing things out and balancing taking in new knowledge with maintenance periods. And so what does that look like for weight loss? It means that sometimes we sprint, meaning we dial in, we focus on hitting the targets, we make the sacrifices, we push forward, we make the progress, and then we spend maybe a week, 2 weeks, a month, maybe, and maybe it's a really busy season like the holidays, or you travel, to practice maintaining that, meaning pulling back on how much conscious effort and push and focus that it takes, but not losing the non-negotiables of being able to kind of pull back and say, how do I keep these things in place without stressing over them, without going above and beyond? Because most of y'all only know weight loss in the context of give your all. You need to be fully focused on this. Otherwise, it can't work. And if that is the only way you know how to be healthy, you will only be healthy for very, very short periods of time in your life. So that is the lesson there, right? So make sure that you don't have an incessant focus on forward progress without breaks, that you practice maintaining what you've learned. So that way you don't have big blind spots down the road and you don't end up rebounding with your weight. Okay. Next is expecting to be bad. So when it comes to learning Korean, I unfortunately at this point have the expectation that in 1 year, we plan to go to Korea in October of 2026. I expect that even though I will have been studying for 2 years, that some native Koreans still might not know what I'm trying to say to them, because that is unfortunately what I hear about foreigners and learning the language and things like that. And not only that, but just in the practice of learning, especially in like the first couple of months trying to put some sentences together, it's pretty normal to make a fool of yourself when you're learning a new language. Like talking on the phone with my mom, like I'll have to repeat myself like 3 times of, this is what I'm trying to say, this is what it sounds like where are we not connecting, right? Or just guessing and being like, I think that how I would say this is X, Y, and Z, and then getting literally laughed at by my Korean teacher because she's like, oh no honey, like that's not it. So it's fun, right? And it's something that I expect. It's something that I know that I'm going to be bad at because I am starting this in adulthood, and learning a language is much harder in adulthood than it is in childhood. And I don't fear failure in this process. And I don't fear embarrassment in this process. I actually embrace it. I welcome it, because if I say something out loud and I get corrected, it's actually more mentally salient for me to be corrected and then be like, oh, that was like a little embarrassing. And then I'm going to remember the correction, because our brain will program things in more when there's that emotional tie to it of like, I don't want to make that mistake again. In weight loss, we expect perfection from ourselves. We expect ourselves to be perfect from the start. And one mistake typically triggers gigantic emotional responses. And I've done some thinking as to why I believe this is. And I think it's because we have to eat our entire life. We eat meals all day long. And I think most people assume that because they live in their body and that they eat every day and that they maybe, have exercised in the past, that there's just this higher standard of like, I should know what I'm doing, or I shouldn't mess up because I know what's healthy and I know what's not. But just like how I can know the vocab, but I could totally butcher putting the right sentence together, you could know what foods are healthy, but you're still going to fall flat on your face if you're faced with temptation that you don't know how to handle, cravings that you don't know how to handle, things like that. So I think something that I've learned from learning Korean, making a fool of myself, being with some of my Korean friends back in Northern Virginia and having them speak with waiters, waitresses at restaurants, and me being like, I didn't follow any of that, and I've been studying this for a year, has allowed me to give myself what I call a white belt mentality. Think about a white belt in Taekwondo, in karate, in any martial art. What do? You expect yourself to be freaking terrible because you don't know anything. And it literally, a white belt represents that you know nothing. So if you do that in weight loss, imagine what could happen. Like even if you've lost 100 pounds, even if you should know what to do, even if you do know exactly what the steps are to get the results, or maybe you just think you do, right? That's a lot of people's situations. Nothing against you. It's just we don't know what we don't know, right? And so if you treated yourself as if, okay, I think I know what the steps are, but if I mess up, I'm going to take it as a learning opportunity because maybe I don't know what I don't know. It's the assumptions underneath that are packed in, right? When you have the white belt, it's the assumption that maybe I don't know it all versus expecting yourself to just have it all together. Okay. Next, small habits add up. This one's huge. So when I started studying Korean in December, I did a few things. I downloaded Duolingo, and I have a 213-day streak right now because it has been almost a year, but you know how it gives you those streak freezes and you can skip a day here and there, stuff like that. So I have that. And I also have these books called Talk to Me in Korean, which are workbooks that I said I'm going to do one chapter per day. And one chapter is like one concept, maybe 2 pages, 5 questions, something like that, something small. And then I also have my one-on-one Korean tutor. I did invest in that, where I have one lesson per week. I started that in January, and one lesson per week. And she typically gives me homework that's like a couple pages of writing and reading and listening practice. And that pretty much comprises my daily work. And I have only really missed like a couple of days since I started, because I made the goal so small that all I have to do is pair it with my morning Bible reading, breakfast, coffee. It takes me 5 to 10 minutes. And then I've gotten a little bit in for myself for the day before I pour into everyone else. And that's the thing, is wherever we're setting the bar for our daily habit, is it ridiculously doable? If it's not, it's probably not going to stack up the way that you want it to. In weight loss, it's the same, right? So stop trying to sprint for 2 weeks. Instead, what are the tiniest habits with a large ROI on your time or your energy that you can do every single day? And when you really ask yourself, what can I absolutely do every single day? The list gets much smaller, right? An hour workout a day doesn't fit on that list. Perfect macros every day doesn't fit on that list. What does fit on that list maybe is drinking half your body weight in ounces of water, of going on a 10-minute walk each day, no matter what, 10 minutes, right? Little things like that are what really add up and build huge momentum. When I started this journey, I started doing a post at the beginning of each month that was like the month and my goals. And the list was short that December, but each month it was like the things that I had on that list became automatic. And then I would add one more each month. And all of a sudden that list was like 10 things long. And I didn't realize how quickly all of the habits that I was practicing were adding up. The same can be for you for your health. The next takeaway that I had from learning Korean, or still have, is handling the overwhelm of the road to the finish line being so much longer than you want it to be. So this language is complicated and nuanced. Korean's interesting because you know how in English we have a lot of if you know type of things that we don't even realize in our day-to-day. Like, for example, how the word bear can be spelled multiple different ways and can mean naked bear, bear the animal, to bear something, to hold the burden of something. And it's just like, oh yeah, you just know based on the context of which one you're talking about and then how it's spelled. There's a lot of that in Korean. There's also 2 sets of numbers. There's also basically 3 or 4 different ways to speak to people and address people based on honorifics and they're essentially like their age compared to you, where you speak to people older than you in one way. You speak to people that are a higher status or grandparents to you even in a more respectful way. And then there's a casual way of speaking. So you basically have to learn like 3 or 4 variations of the entire language. So the same goes with weight loss. The finish line is farther away than you think. So let's say your goal is like 15 pounds of weight loss. So you might be thinking like, my finish line's not that far away. But when you really start to dig into it, of what created gaining those 15 pounds and not being able to get it off, beyond just what you're eating and how you're exercising, what about the people-pleasing tendency to put others' needs before yourself to a fault, to where you struggle to make time for yourself, and when you do, you feel really guilty? How long is it going to take to really break that one down? What about the, let's say, relationship with food that you've had since you were 10, 12, whenever magazines and diet culture was popular in your childhood? How long is it going to take to unlearn that? What about the way that your parents spoke to you about food, food waste, how much you should be eating, if you should be cleaning your plate? When you really open those things up, how much unworking and undoing is there to be done? And the reality is, there is no true finish line. And when you can start to view your weight loss journey, even if you have a finite number of pounds that you want to lose, the reality is that we are insatiable creatures as humans. We will have desires beyond that. Once we lose the weight, we're going to want something else. And when we realize that pursuing our health is an infinite pursuit, meaning that once you get fit and healthy, if you don't keep doing it, then you're not going to stay fit and healthy. And then you just stay on the hamster wheel. So the road to the finish line not only is long, but it's also non existent. So expect that to feel kind of overwhelming. Like if I were to say, think about how big the universe is. You know how our brains just kind of like avoid thinking about that because it's way too big to comprehend and it overwhelms us and scares us? Yeah, that's like a bigger version of this. It's overwhelming to comprehend the work that we have to do. So don't overthink it. Just accept that it is a long path forward. And then from there, take one step at a time. Laser in on the small habits in front of you rather than the entire journey ahead. So let me know which of these really resonated with you the most. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, that it brought you maybe a little bit more context about me and my habits and my pursuits outside of work. It's been so fun. I do have a personal Instagram page where I post more of that stuff, and I'm starting to like do a little series where I post some of my learning progress there. So you can go follow me there. I'll put it in the show notes if you really want to. But I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you took a lot away from this episode, and I'll see you back here for the next one.